Good morning. What we're going to do, since we don't allow you to bring coffee in this room, is we're going to get you moving to wake you up. So we're going to start with a song. So Eric's going to lead us.
All right, everybody. I know it's early, but we go to church on Sundays earlier than this, I know. Let's all stand and sing together. Can I have the song "We Are Called" on the screen, please? There it is. Goes like this. Come, live in the light. Shine with the joy and the love of the Lord. We are called to be a light for the kingdom, to live in the freedom, city of God. We are called to act with justice. We are called to love tenderly. We are called to serve one another, to walk humbly with God. Come, open your heart, show your mercy to all those in fear. We are called to be hope for the hopeless, so hatred and blindness will be no more. We are called to act with justice. We are called to love tenderly. We are called to serve one another, to walk humbly with God. Sing a new song. Sing of that great day when all will be one. God will reign, and we'll walk with each other as sisters and brothers, united in love. We are called to act with justice. We are called to love tenderly. We are called to serve one another, to walk humbly with God. We are called to act with justice. We are called to love tenderly. We are called to serve one another, to walk humbly with God. All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you.
You may be seated. Sorry.
I was going to call on the chaplain, but she already arrived.
Already here.
And she is joined this morning by the Towards Racial Justice team. So thank you.
During this assembly, we decided that it would be nice, since we're looking at Hungering for God's Mission, that we would highlight some of our mission ministries within our synod. So at this point, I'm going to call forward our racial justice team, and they're going to lead us in our opening prayer this morning.
Good morning, family. As we're talking this morning about how hungry we are for not just God's justice, but for God's work in the world, for God's kingdom, you'll get to hear not just our own group, but lots of the missions and the ministries that are a part of Lower Susquehanna Synod. Teams that are here to support congregations and leaders and faith communities and inspire us, help us, walk with us the same way that we're called to walk with other people. It would have been very easy this morning to do a racial justice themed prayer, to pray for our African American siblings, to pray for our Latino siblings, to pray for our siblings in Asia. But we didn't want to do that because we wanted to remember why we're called to do racial justice work. For us, the backbone of racial justice work is that we're called to love our neighbors. Whatever our neighbors look like, wherever they're from. Our job is to be with them, support them, offer them whatever they need. As an individual, I'm sure most of you can look around and realize I don't look like most of the people in this room. And there have been plenty of folks who questioned whether or not I could even be truly Lutheran based on how I look and my cultural background. If it hadn't been for a Lutheran pastor, my pastor Joel at Union, not just taking me to our bishop and finding a way for me to be a part of this church, but actually taking me into his church, walking with me, nurturing me, teaching me. There's so many other lives that I wouldn't have been able to touch. And I'm just one, because we have some amazing candidates, pastors, people of color, that are looking for the beautiful liturgy and theology that we have in this church. I don't know about you, but I love waking up in the morning and saying that I'm a part of the Lutheran Church. It gives my heart such joy. And to know that there were people who made a place for me here, who were willing to fight for my place here. That's what holds me on the darker and the difficult days. So we ask you this morning, we call you this morning to be that for members in your community. There are people in your community who do not know that the church loves them, values them, and has a place for them, who don't know that God loves them and values them and has a place for them. So with Towards Racial Justice, we seek to offer training, accompaniment with congregations, coaching, guest visitation, pulpit supply. We provide a wealth of resources, and it will teach you vocabulary and history, but mostly it serves as a reminder to love with open heart, open mind, and equipped, strong hand. So this morning, two of my wonderful brothers, one of whom is the co-chair of Toward Racial Justice with me, Reverend Tim Seitz Brown, and also an amazing pastor, Reverend Titus Clark, will join us to lead us in a very special prayer that is about racial justice. Mostly it's about love. And then Sister Megan will lead us in a song that again is about racial justice, but it's about why we do racial justice work. And hopefully as we can sing together, you'll understand what our call truly is as warriors and as peacekeepers for Christ.
The Lord be with you. And also with you. Let us pray. When I look at the blood, all I see is love, love, love. When I stop at the cross, I can see the love of God.
But I can't see competition. I can't see hierarchy. I can't see pride or prejudice or the abuse of authority.
I can't see lust for power. I can't see manipulation. I can't see rage or anger or selfish ambition.
I can't see unforgiveness. I can't see hate or envy. I can't see stupid fighting or bitterness or jealousy.
At the cross, I can't see empire building. I can't see self-importance. I can't see backstabbing or vanity or arrogance.
I see surrender, sacrifice, salvation, humility, righteousness, faithfulness, grace, forgiveness, love, love, love.
When I stop at the cross, I can see the love of God. Amen.
And you can actually just remain seated and just sing this song with us as a prayer, remembering our siblings that are fighting for life and safety across this country. Will you let me be your servant? Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant. We are pilgrims on a journey. We are travelers on the road. We are here to help each other walk the mile and bear the load. I will hold on Christ like for you in the night time of your fear. I will hold my hand out to you, speak the peace and long to hear. I will weep when you are weeping, when you have laugh with you. I will share your joy and sorrow till we see this journey through. Will you let me be your servant? Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too. Thank you, Megan Clinton. And to everyone, may that spirit of service and hunger guide our morning, our prayers, our words, and our deeds this day. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is Pastor Tom McKee, Synod Secretary, will give us an update on our registration.
Reverend Bishop, as of 8 a.m. this morning, we have 534 registered voting members.
Okay, thank you. And is it possible, Secretary McKee, that you have the minutes to the 2018 Synod Assembly?
It is possible, amazingly. Yes, the Synod Council had reviewed and approved the minutes of the 2018 Synod Assembly, and through the Bishop and Secretary, certified these minutes as the official protocol of said assembly. 2 copies of the 2018 minute book have been deposited in the Region 8 archives as a permanent record of the 2018 Lower Susquehanna Synod Assembly.
Thank you. Then we are ready to move on, and I'm going to call on Deacon Sue Rothmeyer to assume the chair as we hear the results of the first ballot for bishop. It's all yours.
Good morning. For those on the Elections Committee, it was perhaps a shorter evening than for others, but I ask you to join in thanking them for their good and careful work. And I now call on Joe Stepanski from the Bishop's Election Committee as chair to report the results of the first ballot for bishop of the Lower Susquehanna Synod.
Hopefully I don't mess anything up there. And good morning again. I would like to again thank the team, and it really was a team that worked last evening, worked efficiently and accurately and together, and it was really something to behold. On ballot 1, in the election of bishop, the results are as follows. Total number of ballots cast, 479. Number of illegal ballots, 9. Total number of legal ballots, 470. Total number of ballots required for election, 353. The Reverend James S. Dunlop, 266 votes. The Reverend Stephen R. Herr, 109 votes. The Reverend Lisa M. Lieber, 14 votes. The Reverend Timothy A. Mentzer, 11 votes. The Reverend Joel S. Folkemer, 10 votes. The Reverend Matthew B. Best, 8 votes. The Reverend David J. Schreffler, 7 votes. The Reverend Brian A. McClinton, 6 votes. The Reverend Dana Blauch Hansen, 5 votes. The Reverend Beth A. Schlegel, 5 votes. The Reverend Richard E.T. Jorgensen, Jr., 4 votes. The Reverend Rob J. Mialis, 3 votes. The Reverend Brian A. Beery, 3 votes. The Reverend Richard B. Geib, 2 votes. The Reverend Timothy J. Seitz Brown, 2 votes. The Reverend Stephen P. Verkow, 2 votes. The Reverend Kathleen J. Baker, 1 vote. The Reverend Robert C. Blezard, 1 vote. The Reverend David D. Daubert, 1 vote. The Reverend Joseph A. Danella II, 1 vote. The Reverend Nancy R. Easton, 1 vote. The Reverend Benjamin S. Ertzkus, 1 vote. The Reverend Larry G. Hummer, 1 vote. The Reverend Robert G. Moore, 1 vote. The Reverend Elizabeth C. Polanski, 1 vote. The Reverend Stanley D. Reap, 1 vote. The Reverend Edward J. Robbins, 1 vote. The Reverend Robert W. Wallace, Jr., 1 vote. And if I may, very quickly, Michael Faust, are you in the room? Anybody from the election committee? I need to meet one of you over here outside in the hallway. We have a little bit of unfinished business from last night.
Thank you, Joe. Based upon the report of the Elections Committee, there is no election. The second ballot for bishop is scheduled for later this morning. If you have been nominated and wish to withdraw, please go to the pages table or the secretary's desk and turn in a signed withdrawal form. The deadline for withdrawal is 9:30 a.m. today. There will be a break by 9:15 this morning. The names of all persons who were nominated on the first ballot and did not withdraw will be on the second ballot. Those who desire that their name remain on the ballot should turn in their bio to the secretary by one of the following methods: by email to elca.elca.org, on flash drive, or by hard copy at the pages table or the secretary's desk. And if you need further explanation of that email address, Marcia is sitting right down there. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I return the chair to Bishop Dunlop.
I'm going to move to a presentation, and when we talk about God's mission in the church, we often talk about the church, and the expression of the church that we're most familiar with is certainly the congregation, because that's kind of where we live. But occasionally, I think it's important to recognize there is a bigger church. There is the Catholic Church, the whole church. And so one of the things that I wanted to do today was spend a little time with you to talk about what's going on in the whole church, not just the Lutheran Church, but in all of Christianity. And in order to do that, I'm going to kind of use a presentation that I've adapted from the Reverend Wesley Granberg Michelson. He is from the Reformed Church in America, worked at the World Council of Churches, as well as served as the head of the Reformed Church in America. And he gave this presentation at the Conference of Bishops in Illinois on March the 2nd. And I asked him if I could use parts of it, and he gave me permission. So with his permission, I'm going to share some of this information with you. The first thing I want to share is a little bit about where Christianity is. So I'm going to show you a map. This map is, if you take all the Christians in the world, put them on the map, and then put a dot in the center of where they're located, this map shows you over time where Christianity has been. So if you think about that, the beginning of Christianity in 33 AD, at the resurrection of Christ, was 12 people hiding in an upper room in Jerusalem. And so they get a dot over there in Jerusalem. And then you see as Paul's missionary journeys begin and the church begins to expand out into the Roman Empire, the center of the church shifts into the Mediterranean and then eventually up into Asia Minor, which we would call Turkey today, by about 1000 AD. By about 1000 AD, you get the break between the Western Church and the Orthodox Church. And then you see Christianity begin to spread into Europe. And so the migration of Christianity really moves up, and by 1500, around the time of Luther, the center of all Christianity is in Europe, right in Hungary, actually. Now, over the next couple hundred years, it stays in Europe, but look what happens in the 20th century. It moves quickly to the west and to the south. And then in an unprecedented kind of movement in the 20th century, it moves quickly down, and now the center of Christianity is in Mali, Africa. Now this takes into account both the eastern and the western hemispheres, but you can see that Christianity is in fact migrating at an unprecedented rate. The big global picture, Christianity's statistical center of gravity by 2010 had moved to a point near Timbuktu in Mali. Europe and North America, the global north, contained 80% of Christians in 1910, but only 40% of Christians a century later. And by 1980, there are more Christians that are living in the global south than in the global north for the first time in 1,000 years. Christianity's growth in Africa, in 1900, 2% of the world's Christians lived in Africa. Today, 1 out of 4 Christians live in Africa. Christianity grew by 50 million people last year in Africa, on that continent. Just to give you an idea, there are about 3.5 Lutherans in the ELCA. They grew 50 million new Christians in Africa last year. This is not surprising if you've been to the Kandy Diocese. I was in the Kandy Diocese, and at one point I met with the deans, and they said to me, "Bishop, we're a small diocese. We only have 80 congregations. But this year we're starting 10 new ones. How many are you starting?" By 2025, just 7 years from now, 40% of the world's Christians will live in Africa. It's not just Africa. In South America, overall, the Christian population in Latin America was 550 million in 2010. It's projected that it'll be 640 million by 2025, about the same number of Christians in Africa. Non-Catholic expressions of Christianity are growing at 3 times the rate of the Catholic Church, and 80 to 90% of Protestant growth in Latin America comes from Pentecostals. In Asia, there is also rapid growth of Christianity. The Christianity population in Asia is about 350 million people, and this will grow to 460 million by 2025. In the past century, Christianity grew twice the rate of population growth in Asia. And for instance, in Korea, 30% of all people are Christian. The Mungsung Presbyterian Church has 100,000 members. Their choir has 500 people in it. And they have 5 Sunday services. There's another Presbyterian church that worships 75,000 people on a Sunday, and they have 500 pastors on their staff, and they have 684 missionaries around the world. Christianity is becoming a non-Western religion. The future of Christianity is moving out of the West and out of a largely white culture that it's been home in for the last 400 years. Christianity is growing in non-Western, non-white cultures. These changes are then being reflected back into our United States congregations, particularly through immigration and global interrelationships. The world is more interconnected than ever before, and the world is more religious than ever before, and Christianity is experiencing explosive growth. What does this mean for U.S. Christians? This puts together about 10 challenges here in this presentation that are really going to shape the future of Christianity in the 21st century. So as we seek God's future and the Spirit's leading, U.S. congregations must respond to some of these challenges. The first challenge is the revitalization of withering congregations. And this is not new news to us. There are about 350,000 congregations in the United States. In 2015, over half, 57%, were under 100 in worshiping on a Sunday. In the Synod, our Synod, I checked, we're at 72% of our congregations worship under than 100 people on a Sunday. The average attendance over the last couple decades has dropped from 105 to 80. In general, the population is 20% of the population is between 18 and 34, but only 1 in 10 congregations reflect that demographic reality. 30 to 40% of our congregations could close in the next 25 years. 31% of 18 to 34-year-olds are religiously unaffiliated, whereas if you go to people that are average age of 65, only 11% are unaffiliated. Most congregations need to change or face a slow demographic death. These are the trends of the Lower Susquehanna Synod. I started with 1989, which is the beginning of the ELCA, so this is the first year of the life of the Lower Susquehanna Synod, and then 2017 when I had data for that, so that was 2 years ago. Number of members in the Lower Susquehanna Synod went from 150,000 to 83,000. Number of congregations dropped from 279 to 231. The average attendance on a Sunday in the Lower Susquehanna Synod Lutheran churches went from 41,000 to 20,000. Our financial receipts did not go down by that same kind of ratio. They went from 70 million to 61 million. Mission support, that's the money that's sent to the larger church, to the work of the Synod. The original budget, if you adjust for inflation, the original budget of the Lower Susquehanna Synod was $8.2 million, and the budget we used in 2017 was $2.6 million. So you can see that we had a significant drop. And the congregations at the beginning of the ELCA sent 11.7% of their dollars to mission support. And in 2017, our congregations sent 3.9% of their giving. So as our congregations have gotten smaller, we're holding more and more resources in the congregations. So what needs to be done to revitalize? Well, we need to make space for discernment. We need to dwell in God's word, imagine God's future, and focus on mission and share the journey together. And these are the very practices that are foundational to the R3 program that we have begun in the Synod. So we have begun this revitalization effort, but it will take much more work. The second great challenge to look at is embracing the color of the future. People of color are providing the growth in the U.S. churches. From 1991 to 2014, white Protestants have declined by a third. Only 28% of white millennials identify as Christian believers. But multiracial congregations have grown. 1 in 5 Americans now belong to a multiracial church. Multiracial churches are more likely to grow than white congregations, show higher levels of spiritual vitality, and immigration is a major contributor to congregational growth. And most growth in evangelical, Catholic, and Pentecostal and mainline denominations are driven by people of color. Denominations across the religious landscape in the United States have to embrace a multiracial future, with all the changes in power and participation that it necessitates, or they will dwindle into self-protective white minorities. For instance, the Assemblies of God between 2004 and 2014, their white membership shrank by 1.9%, while their non-white membership grew by 43.2%. They've grown to 3 million members in the last 50 years, while mainline Protestant denominations have shown steady decline. The nation was founded by white Protestant men, and it was founded on racist principles. And now, for the first time, white Protestants are not the majority in this country. And by the way, if you're not aware, the Lutheran denomination is the whitest denomination in the country. Number 3, we need to see the world through non-Western eyes. The idea of individualism versus community. Individual focus is a Western mindset. Greek philosophy, Roman law. It is why perhaps the Trinity seems so confusing to us, because it's about relationship and not about the individual elements. What does the world look like if you don't think about the individual, but rather each and how they live in the community? There's the issue of rational and supernatural approaches to knowledge. Non-Western cultures assume supernatural forces. You cannot come to the truth through abstract thinking. We are so steeped in this kind of philosophy and statements like, I think, therefore I am. Most of the world, truth comes through legends, rituals, dance that reveal the spiritual nature. How is it that Christ speaks to us? The idea of the spiritual and the material worlds and how they relate to one another. Another challenge is perceiving the world as sacred. If you believe that the world, God's creation, is merely a commodity to be used, then it is emptied of its spiritual significance. But if you believe that the world was created by God and it is good, 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 very good, then the world becomes something that is treasured and cared for. And most of the world sees the creation in that way. So it is important for us to recover theological roots of God's creation. Pope Francis, the Laudato Si, is an encyclical on the care of creation, a call for us to think about how it is that we care for the world. As bishops of Lutheran Church, we gathered with Larry Rasmussen at our academy in January, and there are other gifted Lutheran teachers on the subject of how it is that we will care for the creation that's going forward. And in this, I think we probably need to be following our children. 1.6 million students in 120 countries walked out of their schools. And when asked, they said, "We're protesting now because if not now, when?" They had become convinced that they were put on this planet for the purposes of saving it. When I read Time magazine, one of the student protesters on climate change who walked out of school on March 15th around the world, these kids are 14 to 17 years old. There has not been this kind of focus on the world and the creation since the 1990s. And they're getting this message their whole lives. In school as well as TV, shows like Captain Planet and the Planeteers. And they're frightened by the ozone hole, oil spills, and animal extinction. And they've become convinced they are put here on this world to save it. And we wonder if we're reaching our young people and how we're speaking to them. And one of the ways is to listen to them and to listen to what it is that they care deeply about. Number 5, affirming spirit-filled communities. There's a growth of Pentecostalism. The Azusa Street revival was a century ago. It was the beginning of the Pentecostal movement. In 1970, 5% of Christians were identified as Pentecostal. Today, 10 times as many, 600 million Christians are Pentecostal. 1 out of every 4 Christians is Pentecostal or charismatic. 1 out of 12 people alive in the world today is Pentecostal or charismatic. The growth is 4 times the rate of population growth. Pentecostalism has a deep social root that reaches out to the poor. They are bringing about social transformation. Their essential question is, what is your spiritual story? Their question is not, what do you believe? It has a very kind of messy beginning and diversity, and they're struggling to find a unique voice, but they are a strong force in Christianity in the world today. Another challenge is rejecting the heresy of individualism. Me for the community or the community for me? We have a kind of Americanism, rugged individualism. Pastor John Brock preached a great sermon on this recently at Trinity. You should read it. But we see it in different ways. The story of the lost sheep. When we often speak about that story and think about it, we think about Jesus going out and finding the one and saving the one and rejoicing. But in Africa, I heard that story interpreted, and the interpretation of that story was that they went out and found the lost sheep so that the community could be restored, because it wasn't a community unless all of the sheep were present. Words like pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and God helps them that help themselves are expressions that are not from our faith, but from our American culture. Christianity is not an individual faith. So this is a real difference with our non-Western cultures. There is a concept called Ubuntu in Africa. It is strong in South Africa. Doc Rivers, who was the coach of the Boston Celtics, felt like he had a team that was just merely individuals not playing together, and he took them and taught them this concept of community. And after that, in 2008, they won the world championship. Desmond Tutu says, "We are not human because we think. We are human because we are in relationship with one another. Adam is not human until there is Eve. Not I think, therefore I am, but I am because you are, and we are in relationship." We have to begin to think about de-Americanizing how we speak about the gospel. The "make America great, America greater than everybody else" doesn't really fly in the worldwide Christian community. We need to be able to listen to non-American voices and deepen the formation of our faith for such a time as this. Initiatives like Reclaiming Jesus' Message to liberate the gospel from an American cultural captivity. Faith comes first, not America. And America's superiority really will not be tolerated in the rest of the global community. And it has no grounding in our faith. Number 8, we need to be defeating divisive culture wars. Differences need not divide. We seem to take theological and cultural differences and turn them into religious wars. And so our understanding of critical issues about human sexuality become a great divisive thing, which then flows into our political environment. So our differences in views of human sexuality and same-gender marriage will continue in the church, both nationally and globally, for decades. But we've got to resist framing this as us versus them, because diversity is global. And the church has got to work to change our decision-making processes to hold in tension the both and that we see in the world today. Another challenge for us is belonging before believing. It's a question of what are the standards in which we have people in our communities. And the best way I can do this is with an analogy from Australia. If you are keeping cattle in Australia and you have to figure out how to keep them in, there are two strategies to do that. One is you can put up fences and hold them in. But the other is, if you have wells, they will come to the water. And so one of this kind of image then is, are we churches that provide living water for people to be drawn to? Or are we churches that put up fences and guidelines to keep people in and or out? So there is a real thirst and a hunger in the world for spiritual life and living in a way of spirituality, and we see that in lots of places. We see that in the Taizé community in France, where many, many thousands of people who are not Christian come to that to experience deep spiritual worship in that place. And they don't check their membership cards on the way in the door. There are also pilgrims' mass in Camino de Santiago, where people are walking on pilgrimages and coming to those kind of events because they're not Christian, but they're looking for a deeper understanding of what God has to offer them in the world. And they're not putting up fences around it, but they're inviting people to participate. The last challenge is number 10, saving the world. Overcoming the Great Divide. A divided gospel is one of the worst exports of the U.S. church into the wider Christian world, where we divide our Christianity along our political lines, and you have to believe on this issue and this issue and this issue this way, or this issue and this issue this way. And when we divide the church in the ways of politics, it makes no sense to the rest of the world. The Christian faith in the non-Western world is personal, and social transformation is seen as one whole. The voices of Christians from the global South, once seen on the margins, now form the center of Christianity. The question is, Western and non-Western churches can ask together, what does God love? But if we continue to divide the church on issues around abortion, human sexuality, and moral purity, lining up the liberal left from the conservative right, the rest of the world does not see that any way and doesn't appreciate that import of our dysfunction. The future of faith will be marked by followers of Jesus who are grasped that love compels them to participate in God's salvation of the world. By the way, this photo is from the Kandy Diocese, and that lonely pale person in the middle is me. And it is my metaphor for where the church is today. So there are big questions for us. God's Holy Spirit is bursting the Western bubble and has shaped much of Christianity for the last 400 years. How might our congregations, synods, church-wide bodies respond to these future challenges? How does this assist in the search for the nurture of vital congregations? And what concrete practices might build readiness in our congregations for the transformative growth and change that will come? I didn't present this so that I could then tell you all the answers, because I don't have them. These are the questions that we need to begin to think about collectively as our church. So I gave this to you to start stimulating conversation. If you're interested in this and the future of the church, this comes from a book called Future Faith by Michelson, and there are copies out in the bookstore. So my hope is that we begin thinking about this and thinking about how it is that this shapes our life together and how it is that the church will respond to the changes we're seeing in Christianity around the world. So, our next piece of the agenda is, I touched it, that we're going to take a break. No. Clearly, I am wrong about that. And the problem is my book is over there and my computer is over there, so we're going to wander over here to find out what I forgot about. Oh, of course, I knew that. Given that we're just running a couple minutes ahead, we thought it would be helpful to put the Portico video in this moment. So we are going to do that, and Barb Debsky is here. Barb is our regional representative from Portico. If you're not familiar with Portico, Portico is the insurance and benefit management for all of the rostered leaders in the church, as well as for many of the lay people of our congregation or that are employed by our congregations. And so they do a wonderful job. One of the joys I have as bishop is to be the representative from the bishops to the Portico board, and they do a wonderful job. And so, Barb, we are grateful that you are here, and you have some information for us.
Thank you. You want to travel with me and introduce me like that everywhere? I'll take that. Thank you, Bishop. If you would share the video, please.
I feel that my purpose is to serve God, but that means to serve others.
Service is reaching out in God's name to meet the needs of other people.
Service is the way that we act out and into our faith.
A life of service is a journey. For more than 200 years, Portico Benefit Services and its predecessor ministries have been called to support the well-being of those who serve.
We are in a community that has many needs. They have no access to health services. We have 2 clinics here. With one of the clinics, they can send people who need some kind of therapy to do mosaic. I feel we are doing the mission that we are called here.
Portico helps staff at faith-based organizations serve with more confidence by providing innovative, cost-effective health and retirement benefits, life insurance, and disability protection.
Loving God and loving people ultimately results in service. There are roles that I serve that are beyond the pews and beyond the church building. The Bike and Coffee Shop has been a wonderful, important icon to the neighborhood in engaging young people. I'm a pastor of a congregation which is a neighborhood of 4,000.
Our Savior's Housing serves people in this community who are experiencing homelessness. The English Learning Center serves newly arrived refugees and immigrants and gives them that critical skill that they need as they come into town. I believe that Jesus walks among us when we reach out to the poorest of the poor and when we welcome the stranger.
Portico celebrates all those who commit to a professional life of service, the tens of thousands of people across the country who are right now building communities, caring for those in need, bringing people together.
This is what we are as a community. Every piece is important. Every person has an important role to fulfill.
Serving you so you can serve others.
We highlighted some amazing ministries in that video, but I've walked among you enough to know that every one of you in a congregation here could have been highlighted in that video. There's some amazing ministries that you're doing, that you're walking with the people of God in the Lower Susquehanna Synod. So on behalf of my colleagues at Portico, I thank you for that. But we also know as much as walking with those who are marginalized is also can be a burden, a worry burden. Will there be enough money, time, funds, manpower? Sometimes our worries are personal. How is the family, the children, the grandchildren? It's a difficult world to navigate today without taking your worries to God in prayer. So we've brought a devotional practice to your assembly today that's on my table. I hope you'll stop and join me in seeing it. It's called an unbinding practice. And what we're encouraging you to do is write these worries, these concerns, these prayers, or perhaps it's even a gratitude that you want to share with the rest of the ELCA community. After you write this on the ribbon, tie it on a globe that I have on the table, I will be taking that along with all of my colleagues who are gathering these across the United States through a Synod assembly season to Milwaukee, to the churchwide assembly this summer. We're going to have them on display at a breath prayer station where we can, as the whole church, continue to pray for the prayers of the church. So I hope you'll stop and see me at my table and participate in that. We also have a little flyer prepared so that you can take this back into your congregation to use. Thank you again. I do want to say that one of the things we know is that hanging on to worries can kind of be some days like swimming up against the stream. But after a while, you just have to let it go and let the river of peace take you to the shore. So as you continue your ministries in the Lower Susquehanna Synod, people of God, I pray that your swim is easy. Thank you, Bishop.
I'm going to take a chance here that I know what's coming next. What's coming next is a break. So we're going to give you a break. It is now a couple minutes before 9, and we're going to break until 9:30. So you have about a half an hour. Give you a chance to kind of have some conversation, perhaps about the presentation, visit the bookstore, get a cup of coffee out in the hallway, And don't take your voting devices with you. And are there any other things I'm supposed to tell them? That's it. You're on break. Thank you.